We pull our shit completely uneventful. And I look at my watch and I'm like, that was my last guard shift in the Army, bro. We both turn around and stand up. We're shoulder to shoulder. My right shoulder is literally touching his left shoulder. And we stand up right at dusk and single shot. Sniper went right between the two of our heads.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear the combat story of David Waterhouse, who was part of 2nd Ranger Battalion for 6 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. David had the honor of serving alongside his fellow Rangers for years and the challenge of being on the ground to recover the bodies from the wreckage of the Operation Redwings crash that we all know from the Marcus Luttrell Lone Survivor story. David and his friend Sean Spencer cataloged David's combat experience in a documentary now streaming on Amazon Prime, aptly titled Ranger, in which David recalls his service in Iraq and Afghanistan. The description for that film notes that this is seen through the eyes of a special operations soldier and a first-hand account that documents the brutality of combat and the raw nature of killing and death. It's a journey of innocence lost and the scars of war etched into the minds of service members. As David and I discuss in this episode, the documentary, like so many combat story, tells the story of David, but at the same time, a story so familiar to so many vets and family members. David and I get pretty deep on the concept of the brotherhood that exists between veterans and some of the scars this experience can leave behind, and I hope you enjoy this combat story as much as I did. David, thanks for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's truly a pleasure and an honor to be here.
So not many of the folks we've hosted on Combat Story have a program up on Amazon that you can go and find. So you have Ranger, this fantastic documentary. And I just wanted to ask a little bit from your perspective, what was it like making that and how did you come to make this movie?
Well, I guess I'd start first by saying it was a little terrifying. Um, I've always, enjoyed telling stories, but usually it's to an audience. And when you're talking to a camera, you get no feedback because it's just a camera. So the first day was absolutely terrifying. I went home and like a football player studying tape on the next opponent, and I went home and like mentally smoked myself and was like studying tape like don't talk so much with your hands, don't scrunch your eyebrows too much, all those things. And, by the time we came back the second day, the second and the third day was a 3-day shoot. We got about almost 9 hours of footage out of that. But it was a daunting task, but the whole process started so many years ago with Sean and I. The director, I met Sean when he was 7. I was 15. So I've known Sean for 25 years. We were next door neighbors. And Sean always had a lot of aspirations about joining the military. So when I came back from my service, he was living right next door and was very interested in some of the stories. And, I wanted to share with him some of the, pitfalls and some of the things that, if you're going to, do this to watch out for. And through that, it just kind of developed, and we just kind of never stopped talking about the stories. I had no one to vent to other than the guys that I was there with, and he was just always there and was interested. And I was kind of close knit about a lot of things because he was still, I don't know, 15 maybe at the time. I was like, I don't want to overload you, but I'll give you some of the details. But I wanted to be honest with them and not be misleading. There's so many people that, as that have joined the military have been misled. I wanted to at least make sure that I was giving them proper information. And through that, we just kind of kept telling the story. And we thought about, instead of a documentary, our initial thought was, oh, we should write like a war journal or book. And we did a couple hundred pages, and we realized real quickly that neither of us knew shit about how to write a book. So we were like, all right, well, we both like movies. Let's try our hand at this. And Sean was, developing filmmaker. And this story's 17, 18 years in the making. And what kind of finally brought it to fruition was I have a bunch of younger kids, and I wanted to try to find a way to explain to them why, their dad was a little different than maybe their friends' dads or something. And so it really started out as almost an explanation to them they would watch later to be like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. And once we kind of sent it out for our initial beta testing, we realized that this story was a lot bigger than just one person, and that this could maybe have the potential impact to actually help a lot of guys that maybe don't have the same outlet that I had. I was very fortunate to have Sean, and I know a lot of guys come home to nothing. And I wanted to take the opportunity that I had to try to help. Once we realized it was bigger than us, to try to help other guys that weren't as fortunate as I was to be able to come home and have supportive support network.
Yeah,
So that's kind of how it started, and it just kind of has evolved since there.
it's super interesting. So I think one of the things I try to say often on this show, or I've said often, is that I feel like every vet, if you've gone outside the wire, has like a Hollywood story in them. For people who haven't been downrange, it's hard to believe, but the things that go on when you're outside the wire and in contact are just so hard to make up. Like you can't, especially at such a young age. So I think this is a great example of somebody who in their career and their time outside the wire has such a story like this. And you mentioned you didn't really have an outlet to talk to at the time. How did it feel when you told that story?
Scary. There's we have a code in soft, and you don't talk. And so I was very apprehensive about putting this on film, especially when we realized it was going to get out to the general public. And honestly, I was petrified of the Ranger community and going to be like, oh, you're a rat, you're talking about shit you shouldn't be talking about. So that aspect of it, I mean, honestly, to this day, it still makes me nervous. But we've gotten a ton of great feedback. You just don't want to tell the wrong story or tell anything misleading. You want to make sure you're telling things proper, to pay tribute and honor to to not only the guys that did it, but especially to the ones that don't have a voice anymore. And so that has been our main focus, is just to make sure that we respectfully those all the lives involved, and anyone that's ever gone over there, had anything to do with any war, whether it be World War II, Vietnam, Korea, um, Desert Storm. I mean, this kind of turned in our mind in story for everyone that didn't have a voice. And I was just very fortunate to have a platform, and now I'm sitting here, having the privilege of talking to you.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just feel like if we didn't take advantage of this, then we would be doing everyone a disservice.
Yeah, I mean, and so I do encourage people to go and watch it. It's like somebody took a combat story interview for people who watch this show and like really made it look great. I mean, you talk through why you joined up. It's got photos from you downrange. It's got that intensity, and you're talking through these experiences. So, and we'll touch on some of those moments, but I would still just encourage people to watch this. It's really well done. In the recording, David, you wear a Red Sox cap.
Yeah,
Why is that?
I was born in Natick, Massachusetts. Actually, I am a Yankee by nature, and I've when you come out being a Northerner, especially from Boston, you're born and it's like, here's your Red Sox hat, here's your Patriots jersey, here's your Celtics jersey, here's your Bruins jersey, and if you root for anyone else, you're a traitor. And so I always just tried to rep the home team. And the Red Sox hat that I wore in the documentary, actually, I don't think there's any pictures in the actual documentary, but I wore that hat for all six of my deployments, and we were just kind of messing around. That was my cap. I was either wearing a helmet or I was wearing a Red Sox hat. So we thought it would be fitting. And a lot of the guys, obviously, from there, I was stationed at Second Ranger Battalion in Fort Lewis on the West Coast, and being an East Coast kid for my whole life, I was the minority, to say the least. Most of the guys are from California, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, like those Pac West North places. So I was definitely the minority, but I felt like I needed to rep where I was from. So
Yeah.
um,
Love
So
it.
I rocked it every time wasn't wearing a Mitch and nods. I was in my Red Sox hat, in the gym and all that stuff. So we just wanted to keep it true
Yeah.
to how it was over there. So,
I had a feeling I was going to ask if you wore it downrange because I didn't see that in the
oh
pictures
yeah.
necessarily, but and guys would wear that. They'd have their fire department, from New York or their Yankees hat
Hmm.
or whatever it was.
Oh yeah.
A lot of Red Sox hats, though, for sure. Um, so one of just before we move on from Ranger, you mentioned like it's giving you some opportunities. People have reached out. Are there just a couple that come to mind? Because I've noticed that with Combat Story. Like I didn't start it to build connections or anything or have people reach
Yeah.
out, but it's almost like a natural byproduct of talking about some of the pain. Anything in particular that comes to mind for folks who have reached out or connections you've made?
Absolutely. One of the biggest surprises for Sean and I was, we our biggest obstacle was to clear the Ranger community, the soft community,
Yeah,
and get the buy-in from them to be like, okay, like, you're not a rat, you're not spilling things. It's been, 17, 18 years. I think, the statute of limitations has probably run up. We may be able to actually talk about this. The biggest shock to us, when we initially kind of looked at this, we were looking at, what's your kind of target age group? And we kind of were like, all right, maybe like 22 to 36 or something like that. And that's like, okay, let's focus on that. Since it's come out, one of the biggest surprises I know for me, and speaking with Sean, he feels the same. It's been the families, and it's been some of the guys that that I was over there with and served with, who are going home, they're watching it with their wives, they're sharing it with their dads, their moms, their aunts, their uncles, brothers and sisters, and it's just been amazing. Like, so many guys, and myself included, when I got out, I never told the woman that I was with the whole time I was in there. I never told her anything, and I thought I was doing her a favor. Honestly, I was trying to shield her from what I was experiencing and what we were experiencing at that time. And I think damn near down to the man, everyone else did the same thing. It was just kind of the early war was just kind of a different generation of guys, not to take anything away from anyone, but we were just quiet. We just didn't talk. And so many wives, they've never heard any of this stuff before. So, and I relate it like this. Like, if I sat down with my wife and I tried to tell her a story, we've been married for too long. She's going to start ignoring me in about 5 seconds, and we'll start arguing about dishes or something, right? But when someone else is telling the story, people have a tendency to listen more. And so a lot of these guys have been able to show this and share it with their families. And like I said, wives have been the big one, and been able to show them this, and then they don't have to talk. So I'm their voice,
yeah,
and they can sit back and watch, and their wives or significant others or whatever can look at it and say, holy shit, this is what you were doing the whole time that you never said anything about. And that has been the biggest surprise about the whole thing, at least to me. And I don't want to speak for Sean, but I'm pretty sure he feels the same. Is we didn't see that one coming. We didn't see the outpouring, the messages coming in about, oh my God, I understand my husband so much better. I understand my son so much better. Thank you for making
yeah.
this. You've cleared up a lot of clouds that have been sitting there for all these years. So to us, that was just fantastic for us, just to see that, like, hey, we're helping not only the guys not remember this but come to terms with it, and also we're helping the families at the same time. And to us, that you can't get, it doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
To be the voice of that world, for them. And so that's just been the most incredible part of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I had the same impression when I started this program a couple of years ago with like, oh, it's going to be these young guys and it's so varied. And even the movie Ranger, it's about you and Afghanistan and this war, but you could very easily, if you were in Vietnam, you could see that and be like, oh, he's
Yeah, we
trying
did
to
that
get his
shit too.
he's trying to get his socks on while they're still moving. I know that. Oh, he fell in the
Yeah,
water and he's
fuck, where are my
freezing.
Gore-Tex socks,
Yeah.
man? You guys hold up. I don't want to be left alone out here. Why
I
did
just
I
think
just
there's so
fall in
many
this river in the first
similarities.
place?
So many
Yo, I
similarities.
mean, and that was the thing, and Sean did an amazing job with the editing and being able to piece together the story. Because one of my faults is I'll get off on a tangent and we could be talking about one thing and we'll end up 8 stories down the line. And he's like, hey, why don't you laser that back into what we were initially talking about? So I have a tendency to drift. And Sean just did a fantastic job of keeping, him having such an intimate knowledge of the stories for as long as, we've been working together and been talking. He had the ability to handrail
Yeah.
and keep it, to where people could consume it, where it wouldn't be. I mean, it's already a lot, but we don't want people drinking through a fire hose trying to understand this. It's hard enough for people that have never been able to understand it in the first place. So, we were very careful with it, but Sean just did an amazing job editing and telling the story.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
I can't give him enough credit.
So, with this, one of the things as I was prepping, and I don't think this comes out in the documentary necessarily, but, and so I call it a documentary. Maybe we call it a movie. I'll defer to you on
We
that.
refer to it as a doc. Yeah, we
Okay.
refer
Yeah.
to it as a
It
doc.
feels like
Anyone could.
documentary, but
I've heard bio. I've heard like 18 different things. You
okay,
call it whatever
whatever.
you want.
Ranger, the documentary. I don't think this comes up, but it's a very common theme that I've seen, which is guys who tend to end up in the military who I've interviewed, especially the soft community, somewhere in their childhood have this experience with a bully and taking someone on. And I just wanted you to tell a little bit about that if you could.
So I didn't get bullied in high school so much. I was a jock in high school. Played baseball, golf, soccer, and so I was kind of in the jock crowd. So high school, I didn't really get bullied, but in middle school, I was a real scrawny kid. I probably was 5'9", 120 pounds, soaking wet, and I did get picked on. And I remember that feeling. And I mean, I never got in a fight at school, but I remember getting pushed. I remember feeling backed into a corner. And as I got older, I remember kind of this feeling coming over me that like I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to be the one pushing, but I wasn't going to be the one getting pushed. And I think getting bullied in middle school helped, with my experiences later on down the line, where it's like, being able to have a sense of control over yourself, but still have that aggression where you're willing to go out there every night and take it to the enemy. And that's what you have to do. I mean, if you're not out there taking it to them, they're taking it to you. So, I mean, you got two choices. And I've always been more of a pass fail person myself. I didn't like to get ABC grades. Did we win or did we lose? And that's kind of how I always, my mind broke it down as an athlete too. I could have hit 3 home runs in a baseball game, but if we lost, I don't give a shit. We lost. So having that kind of sports background, I think also really helped the transition into being in the military because I was just so used to that community and being around like-minded people who had a like-minded goal. And I when I went to MEPS, I went in and I knew what I wanted to do, and I went in and I was like, hey, I want to go, I want to 11 Bravo, and I want a RIP contract. And I mean, I can't probably tell you I don't work at MEPS, but there's probably a lot of people that come in there and say that, and they're just watching Black Hawk Down on TV or some shit, and they're like, I want to go do that. That looks cool. And so I went in with that, in mind. This is what I'm going to do, or I'm not. I'm not going to join. I'm not going to go in and just do something that I could do on the street. Why would I join the military to do that? And so when I went into MEPS, I was like, look, here's what I want. Bam, bam, bam. And the MEPS recruiter was like, we don't have any slots. And I was like, okay. He was like, we can get you can get in the Ranger Battalion if you want to be a mechanic. I said, well, my buddy owns a garage about 20 minutes down the street from here. If I wanted to be a mechanic, I'd go work for him. And he was like, well, there's no slots. And I was like, okay, sir. And I stood up as a 20-year-old kid, stood up, shook his hand, said, thank you very much for your time. I turned around and I walked out. Got about 4 steps away from the desk. He said, all right, hold on. Come back, sit down. He's like, let me make a phone call to the Pentagon. I got a call. I forget what the guy's name is. And I'm like, all right, man. I'm kind of sitting here in my head, like laughing, like, all right. And he makes a call. He's on the phone for about 2 minutes. Hangs up the phone. He's like, oh, slot just opened up. I think we got a slot. I'm like, all right. So I had my RIP contract going in, which is all I wanted. I just wanted an opportunity. And I was able to, you know, take advantage of that opportunity. I mean, through all the smoke sessions and all the training and the torture, and all the stuff that they can't do to people now. You just smile and nod and, just understand like, hey, this is my end objective. I could have done a lot of things in civilian world, but if I'm going to be here, I want to make sure I'm, fighting alongside with the best people that I could possibly be around.
Yeah.
And so for me, it all kind of was the same process through sports, through, through that process, and then through all the training and stuff. I always just inherently had that sense of team and community. And so that was a relatively easy transition for me when I made that jump.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides access to professional counseling and therapists and lets you connect with the provider securely from your home, over video, chat, or phone, which I really love. You've heard us talk to so many guests who wish they could go back in time and tell their younger self to go seek therapy earlier and get the help they needed sooner, myself included. It's so easy to say that you got this and just keep pushing those demons inside, but they find a way out in the end. I promise you that. And when you're at your best, you can do great things. But sometimes life gets you bogged down and you may feel overwhelmed or like you're not showing up in the way that you want. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of yourself. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/combat today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/combat. And if you do this, you're helping the show out as well. So please take a look at this. And now, back to this combat story. So it's funny, I don't want to drop a name here, but there's one of the people who listens to this routinely reached out to me and he was like, there's probably a show that you could make where you only talk about what goes on in a recruiter's office. Because
you could make a Band of Brothers series off of recruiting offices, I'm sure of it.
I mean, it never when you were like going down the MEPS road, I'm like, here we go. Here's another one. This is great.
Oh yeah, there's always everybody's got a MEPS story.
So, but you said you knew what you wanted to do. Where did that come from?
My father he was not in the military, but he's always been around. I grew up in a shipyard. He's always he's an environmentalist. Cleans tanks and ships, builds JP5 tanks, sand tanks, stuff like that. So, I mean, I think the first time I was in shipyard, I was 3. And I remember this guy like stealing my little baby set of golf clubs out of the back of the pickup truck while we were sitting in the shipyard. And I realized like, yeah, no, this place sucks. Like it's like, I don't want to be here. So my old man, when I told him that I joined, he was like, "You gonna be SEAL?" And I was like, dude, I fucking hate boats. I've been on boats since I was a little kid. I said, I got nothing against SEALs or anything. This is not what I want to do. And he was a little disappointed in that, but he came to terms with it once he realized like boats are his passion. I just did it as I probably worked in shipyard. I've been fired like 4 times, and 4 of them were from my dad. I don't think I've ever been fired by anybody else. So working with your family is always a challenge. But now once he realized like I was committed to it, and that I was I had that desire, I had that fire to see it through. He got over that real quick. He really didn't care what I wanted to do. He was just a Navy guy. I worked on ships his whole life, and assumed I'd follow the Navy path. And I had too much of it, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going the total opposite way. You want the water? I want the earth. Man, I'm not a liability in the water, but I'd rather be on the ground."
Yeah, but where did the Rangers come from? Was it Black Hawk Down? Was it something else?
It was prior to Black Hawk Down. I had heard. Something about it was I don't remember which show it was, but it was talking about when they jumped into Panama. Not that was a massive invasion anymore than really Grenada was at that point, but I remember watching a documentary on Panama when I was younger, and I was like, oh, that looks cool. That looks like something maybe I could do that. And then when Black Hawk Down came out, that was I think 99, I believe, somewhere right around that. Well, Saving Private Ryan had come out first, and ironically enough, he was in Charlie Company, First Platoon, 1 Charlie, and I ended up with 1 Charlie, 2nd Battalion as well.
That's awesome. That's
happenstance. But I remember that, watching those 2 movies, and I still wasn't even of age. I was still in high school, I think, when Black Hawk Down came out. Or maybe it just graduated. And that was kind of, I wouldn't call myself a Black Hawk Down baby, but I would say that if there was a tipping point when 9/11 happened and I watched that, I was like, well, I want to be with those guys. I'd rather be on the street. I'd rather be getting my hands dirty. I'd rather be there with the guys than, and no offense, I'd been on an artillery piece 6 miles away. I'd rather be, if I'm going to be in it, I fucking want to be there. I'm not going to half-ass this.
Yep.
Lord knows there's plenty of shit in your life you can half-ass. I didn't see this being one of those things.
Got it.
So yeah, that was, I would say that probably those 2 movies were that's kind of what pushed me that way. But I had already kind of had it in my head that, if I was going to do anything, that's kind of I thought jumping out of planes would be awesome. So I did it for the first time, and then I was scared shitless. It sounds super cool, and then you stand in the door like, oh shit, I'm about to exit this aircraft for no good reason whatsoever. And so, but, that's part of the thing. Yeah, and it was, I look back on it and, I wouldn't trade, even going through the training and stuff. It sucks. You get smoked, you're getting shit talked to you all day, just trying to mentally break you. And yeah, I missed that though. Like, it was challenging to me. And that challenge excited me. I didn't want to be just the average run of the mill person. If I was going to do this, I wanted to try to be as exceptional as I could. And so that challenge I embraced. And as you know, too, the body will keep going. The mind is what shuts you down. And so if you have that mentality going into it, I think you just have an advantage over maybe the next person that, hasn't faced adversity in their life or hasn't lost a championship game and had to deal with to be able to rebound from that and get up the next day and be like, all right, fuck it, we got to go back to work. We got to get better so we can beat this team next year. And so like that was just kind of that sports mentality kind of just carried over. And people always call soccer players grass fairies, but I'll be honest, I played competitive soccer for up till I was 16, and the endurance that you get from running for 90 minutes. Actually, I would credit soccer for that, being able for me to be able to, we're going to go on a 5-mile run. Whatever. I used to run for 90 minutes. I played center midfield. I ran for 90 minutes straight. No big deal. And so like that kind of gave me confidence too, and all that helps. It all, fills that cup up with like, yeah, I got enough to do this. I think I can make it through this.
So when you first get to Ranger Battalion, so you go through the training and everything, and you get to the unit, what is the welcoming committee like for the new guy on the totem pole there?
Stressful. It's funny when you graduate and you make it through all the training and you're like, yeah, you pin that scroll on, you think you're the baddest motherfucker that's ever walked on the earth, right? And you haven't done a damn thing yet. You don't even know who your friends are going to be for the rest, these years of your life. And so you get humbled real quick. And I'm sure you can relate to that too. You come in, you think hey, I completed all this, and they're like, you haven't done shit yet. And they had actually just come back from a 6-month deployment in Afghanistan, and they had been home for like a week and a half.
What year
when
was
we
this?
showed up? This would have been in July of 03.
July of 03, is that what you said?
I was on 03, yeah. It's when I actually got to the battalion. I enlisted in September of 2002, but I was on delayed entry for 4 months until my slot opened up. And which was funny because when I actually got to my platoon, there were like 5 guys in my squad. And I'm like, hey, dude, we are massively undermanned here. And they're trying to cut corners over at maps. And we're in the middle of a war. And, it's like, why don't we have more guys? Yeah. And then when you're there for about 5 minutes, you realize that we don't have that many guys because not that many people can do this. And so Oh, my first day, they brought us into the conference room, the battalion conference room, and there were only 18 of us. We started our pre-RIP class with like 118 guys, and we graduated with like 18 guys. And they were like, all right, this RTO, he's going to third bat. This medic's going to regiment until he goes to SOCM, and the rest of you, 11 Bravos, there were like 14 of us or 15 of us. You guys are all going to 275, which is heartbreaking for me. It's 3,000 miles away from where I was from. And, they gave you a list, itemized, first, second, third, where you want to go. It's like first, third, second. Yeah, they didn't listen to any of that. They just shipped all of stuff second battalion. So, yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world now, but looking back on it, I was a little butthurt. I was like, why'd you even make a list, man?
Yeah. What's the reputation in the community of second battalion? Like, if you're just joking around with a guy from first and third, and they're like, oh, you're going to second, you're going to the unit that's like what? What would they say?
They all kind of, it's funny. And it's actually funny you bring that up because I do some military, government contracting or whatever. And I run into a guy, most of the guys that I run into are from third. And when they find out, they're like, oh, sorry, man. I'm like, it's always just, the casual jab. But, there's always going to be ball busting. But at the same time, we're all same family. The cool thing about being at second, honestly, was we were 3,000 miles away from the flagpole. So, we were more lax. I mean, we handled business just the same. But, third Ranger Battalion, they had their hats off, Ranger rolled, and this and that. And like 275, we're in our shit like kicked back like halfway up our head. Like, fuck, dude, we got 5 hours before the head shed's going to be here. So like if they did fly out to do a surprise inspection, one of the staff duty guys at regiment would call up our staff duty and be like, hey, RCO, RSM just got on the plane. They'll be there in 5 hours. It was like, cool, we better start getting shit squared away then. Be prepared for inspection. I mean, like I said, it was never out of control, but it was just a little bit more lax. We were just, I enjoyed being away from the flagpole. Looking back, I wouldn't have wanted to be like right next to regiment. It's just too strict.
Yeah. Just before we jump into you getting downrange, I wanted to circle back on something you said because I've been thinking more about this. So you mentioned you didn't even know who your friends were going to be for these coming years, right? And I think for you and I and guys like us on the back end of a military career, we look back very fondly on those friendships that we forged. If you could put yourself back as like the 20-year-old before you got in and tried to think of like, what am I going to get out of this? And what am I going to value? What would it have been? Would it have been the friendships? Like, I don't know if I would have thought that at the time.
I know. No, I that was probably the farthest thing from my mind. And the irony of that is it's on the forefront of my mind every day.
It's what I value most, now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without the friendships, I mean, what's the point? I mean, you want to go out on the street with somebody you don't give a shit about? I don't. And to me, that's been the most amazing part of it. It's just the lifelong friendships that you make while you're there. And no, I did not see that. that was not on the forefront of my mind. And now, like I said, that's one of the only things I think about is, God, I am so lucky to have made friends and with some of the greatest men that have ever walked this earth. And it's just, like I said, I'm just so humbled to be a part of such an unbelievable organization, and just so many great guys. I mean, and to me, that's the story. It's all of us. No one does this shit by themselves. No one.
What is it? This is going to sound cheesy. I don't mean it to, but just like if you're looking in from the outside, like what is it that makes that relationship so strong?
Probably the suck. I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy either. Misery loves company, but I mean, like when you get fucked up next to a dude, like there's a bond that grows between you. It's like embrace the suck together, and I think that is kind of with, at least in my opinion, kind of where that foundation starts. It's like, hey, when you get in a Ranger Battalion, like until you go get your tab, it doesn't matter if you're E2, E3, or specialist, you're fucking private. Until you go to Ranger school, right? It doesn't matter what your rank. You can't in the infantry, you can't make NCO status until you go get your tab. So, you spend, you're doing AOs at night, every night, with the guys, and you're getting smoked with the guys, and you're running with the guys, and you're policing out the range with the guys, and like just that just shared experience of sucking, and just I think that just builds a bond that just is stronger than super glue. I mean, it just bonds you with those people because you've embraced the stuff together and you've seen shit together and you've held each other together, hugged each other, cried together. And, and most people don't talk about that side of it. But I mean, you can only see so much shit. I mean, we're all human. Right? I mean, so like emotion is part of the deal. We are taught to tuck that shit away, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think that bond of just collective suffering builds a friendship from the ground up, at least in my opinion.
I'm with you. I think the other thing, as I think about that, it's the shared suck of training, and then it's amplified, I think, when you're in combat and you really realize you and these other group of complete strangers at one point in life, all of you signed up to go and possibly get killed for just that little pack of people. And you also agreed to get paid almost nothing to do it. You're all away from family. Like
one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, I think it was my second Afghanistan trip. I don't want to jump ahead, but we were sitting up on the border of Pakistan, and I pulled out like a little notepad, and we started doing the average of like how many roughly hours we worked a day, and then broke it down, for, what our hourly pay would be. And even with combat pay and jump pay and all that. And I think people in prison actually make more money than we did when we were over there. And that was a little deflating. I probably should have waited till we got home and not done that in the middle of the field when we're not necessarily the greatest spot in the world. But like, I think we make like $1.08 an hour, roughly, to do this. And I think the guys in prison make like 88, 90 cents. I mean, we're barely making prison wages, but honestly, the last thing in the world is money.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just trying to make it to the next day and, make it home. And I mean, you don't even really think about trying to make it home. You're just like, can we make it to tomorrow? Like that's a win.
Yeah.
Having long-term objectives was not really our thing at that point. I mean, I really don't think anyone, I turned 41 in July. I don't think anyone that I was with expected to be this late in age. And, I certainly never expected to be sitting here talking to you,
yeah.
to be honest.
No, I hear you. I mean, with that, if we jump to your first time downrange, David, can you tell us what rank are you at the time? What year is it? And what's your AO? And then take us to your first time just outside the wire there.
So my first time, like I said, I got in in battalion in 03, July. Trained up for a couple months, and then there was a push. They thought they had some actionable intel, and they mobilized the entire regiment and sent us over on an operation called Operation Winter Strike, and that was in November 2003. And we had been I remember stepping off the aircraft and being like, "Holy shit! Like, I'm actually in Afghanistan. I can't believe this, right?" It's kind of very surreal when you walk off the back. And I remember a guy.
Why is that, David? Why is that? Just a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll get right back to this combat story. As you know, I live in California, where we can have earthquakes and fires, and I grew up in Florida with hurricanes. I know firsthand how natural disasters can quickly and unexpectedly put me and my family in a position where we have to hunker down, shelter in place, and sometimes without power, so I always want to have food available. You can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years super survival food. Handpicked right in a family-owned owned facility in the U.S., giving jobs to over 200 Americans, which we love. The kits are compact, sturdy, water-resistant, and stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use the code COMBAT to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including their 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com and use COMBAT to get 10% off. That's the number 4patriots.com. Use the code COMBAT and start building your own stockpile today. And now, back to this combat story. Can you just say, for people, I hear you on that, but I remember on the documentary you say it so interestingly. I just wanted you to talk about that.
It was just so surreal because, you know, I just, you know, as you're going through all the training and, you know, you prep yourself to do all that and you think you're going to be prepared and you're like, I got this, blah, blah, blah. And then my foot hit the ground and I just remember being like, what the fuck did I just get myself into? Because then the reality slams into you, right? Where you're like, oh shit just got real. Like it was all fictitious in a way, you know, up to this point. The first foot hit the ground and I was like, holy shit, I could get fucking killed here. And, you know, we landed in Bagram Air Force Base and I remember a guy patted me on the shoulder. He goes, congratulations, your CIB. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? You haven't even got shot at yet. He goes, just wait. And that was the first thing anyone said to me when I walked off the ramp. Just wait. I was like, oh, okay. So we got on the ground and I mean, we weren't settled for trouble. And we got our marching orders. And they're like, you guys are going to infill by Chinook and then via Hilux up in the, you know, Hindu Kush mountain range in the middle of winter. And we were up at about, you know, we infilled about 10,000 feet by truck. We probably infilled by helo at about 8. And then drove up a couple thousand feet. And I mean, I remember sitting in the back of a Hilux, which people that don't know what a Hilux is, basically like Toyota Tacoma, just a kind of ghetto version of it. And I remember sitting in the bed of the truck on an MRE box and some water cases driving up these trails. And as day kind of broke, I remember sitting on like kind of the edge and I'm looking over the side at like a 2,000 vertical foot drop off just to nowhere. And like half of our tires on the trail and the other half is not. And I'm like, have we been driving like this all night? And like, that was my intro into like, welcome to combat, motherfucker. Like, and it was like, dude, we could have been dead so many times. And we had no idea. And, you know, it was Ramadan at that time. So like they were, you know, don't eat in front of the Turks and, you know, be respectful, you know, just drink water, this and that. And so, you know, we were trying to, you know, for me being my first time, I'm trying to learn the customs, make sure I'm not being offensive to anyone that's going to be helping us. So, you know, that's where a lot of the buddy system comes in, where you're like, hey, you've been here once before, like, what's the deal? So you start to rely on, you know, guys that have experience. And so, you know, when they dropped us off in the middle of the Hindu Kush mountain range, in the middle of the winter, and we dismounted and just started walking. For, I think first we were 15 days, just kind of clearing village to village. We were looking for particular HVT at the time, big guy. And we were all up there in the middle of nowhere and we were just surviving. Every day was a survival. And we didn't have, you know, we couldn't carry enough bottled water. So we had like platypuses and iodine tablets when the platypuses took a shit. And we would have to go down to the river every morning and fill up, I don't know, a whole platoon's worth of canteens and carry them back up while guys pulled security, because we were in, you know, Indian country. I mean, the places you don't want to be. You know, like you're off the beaten trail. And, you know, that was the thing that I realized very quickly about Afghanistan was that feeling of like, I'm being watched. No matter what I'm doing, someone is watching me. And that uncomfortable feeling of just knowing that all the time, every step you took, every action you made, someone's watching what I'm doing. And I remember that being one of the most uneasy feelings I had. And, you know, over time, you just kind of just becomes part of your normal day.
Yeah.
But you know, it's that was one of the major adjustments for me, other than the altitude, which was that took a minute. Walking at that elevation. Obviously your breathtaking. Every 5 steps feels like you ran a mile. It's like that took a minute to get acclimated to. I don't even know if you. It was funny. Some of our terps and our guides. At this point, we're almost world class athletes, and granted we're humping 100 pounds, but these guys are just running up the side of the mountain. We're like, tell that motherfucker to slow down. Like, we can't keep up with them. And these guys are running up the side of the hill like it's nothing. It's like, it was just eye opening. It was just a 2 weeks of just holy shit. And so that was like the first initial combat experience.
Had you been outside the U.S. to a third world country before that point?
Yes. When I was younger, I was in youth group for my church, and we went on a couple mission trips, and every 2 or 3 years we would go out of the country to a different, we do, 1 year would be in country, or 2 years would be in country. And then the third year we would go out. Well, I happened to fall in one of those years where we went out of country, and I think I was 15, maybe. And we went to the Dominican Republic. And that was a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah. So this wasn't the first time you'd seen.
No. So, I will say that did give me a little bit of probably a running start as a first-time person being over there. Because I had, experienced, being in a third world country where, you're lucky if you get a mattress. And we were sleeping on the floor over there. And we were rebuilding churches and helping the community. We were there for about 2 weeks. And it was one of the most unbelievable experiences of my life, was helping people that, were less fortunate. And then you get over in Afghanistan, you're like, damn, those people in fucking Dominican Republic are rich as shit. Yeah. This is the poorest place I've ever seen in my life. And so, it was a culture shock to some of the other guys, but I had a little bit of a running head start on from my experience being in the DR.
And is this also the time where you end up falling in the water?
Oh yeah. The first 2 weeks. Right. Yeah. It was
talk about this because that
was exciting.
Blew my mind, man.
So we had been on one side of this riverbank for the majority of the day. And when I say the majority of the day, our daylight hours were it was only like 5 hours of daylight. Because we were kind of in this valley, and the sun crests, it only hits the valley floor for a couple hours and it's cold as shit again. So we've been walking all day, starting to snow, and we come across this 2x6 that's laid across this river. And there's a rock in about halfway, 2/3 of the way across. And then there's another 2x6 on the rock going from there to the edge of the other bank. And it's snowing. The water's rushing. It's not like a slow, let's go trout fishing in this river. It's kind of a raging river. And one guy, and I'm looking at it, I'm the second guy right behind him. I'm this is a fucking terrible idea. And I got the Skedco on my ruck. My shit weighs 100 pounds. I'm uneven balanced, with all this weight. He managed to make it across. When he got to the rock and the second 2x6, I started to walk across, and this was the longer of the gaps across this 2x6. And I got about 2/3 the way to the rock. And the water's rushing, the snow's slippery on your feet. I'm unbound. Lost my balance into the ice river. And when I say ice river, there were literally chunks of ice floating down this river. It was pretty brutal. And I grew up in the Northeast, so we played pond hockey. That's true. Always an option. You could fall through the ice. That was always thin ice, watch out. This was the coldest water I'd ever experienced by far. And I think the only thing probably that kept me afloat was my waterproof bag, my rucksack. Because when I hit, it was buoyant and kept my head above water. But when I hit that water, I blacked out. And all I remember is it was like a snapshot, like a flash. And I saw an arm. And I just kind of like stuck my hand up, and this arm grabbed me and started pulling me to the other bank. And it was the guy that had crossed first, and he saw me fall and like ran like waist back deep into the water and grabbed me. So I was floating down the river, and he came in and rescued my life and pulled me to shore. Well, after I fell in, the whole rest of the platoon was still standing on the bank. It was just me and him on that side. I'm regaining consciousness slowly as I'm getting pulled to the shore. Everyone else is standing on this side of the bank, and they're like, yeah, we're not going. And so it's me and him on the other side of the river, right? I'm fucking barely conscious. He's trying to like, hey, you good? Slap me on the face. Like, wake up, man, wake up. I'm like, oh, I'm coming to. And he's like, I'm like, what happened? He was like, you fucking fell in the river, dude. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember slipping, like I don't remember much after that. And so that's when I like, the rest of the platoon starts moving up. And I'm like, where are they going? And he's like, no, it's okay. He was like, get you. That's why I start yard sailing my rucksack. I'm like, I got to get my feet dry. Got to get my feet dry. And I start yard sailing my rucks. It's just me and him over there. Well, the whole platoon goes up like 200 meters. And then there's like an actual real bridge. So it was completely unnecessary. Right. So they circle back around to us about 200 meters back down the river where everyone crosses, everybody's dry. I'm the only one that's wet, minus this dude who's like waist deep with it. And I'm like going, my whole rucksack's like yard sale. He was a tab spec 4. I was a PD2. And he's like, all right, you need to find this. You need to find this, just, trying to, help me, like, and so everything's everywhere. And that's when they like got to me. And, as a PD2, like, a lot of respect given. And so it's like, yeah, hey, fell in the river. Who gives a shit? And so I'm just trying to get, warm and establish some sort of body heat. And they're like, all right, let's go. We're on this side of the river now. Let's roll. And I'm like, my shit's everywhere. And like, I am just frantically trying to stuff into my ruck. And I managed to get it all in there with the help from the same tab spec 4 that had rushed in to get me. He's helping me pack my stuff up. And we get it all together. We fall in. We probably walked like half a click up the river, and then it was getting to be dark. And we found a village and kind of bartered with the village elder, and he put us up in a couple of barns. And we got a fire going. I ended up in a head shed barn as a PV2 with like E7s, E6s, like a bunch of squad leaders, E5s, and then PV2 Waterhouse sitting over there in the corner, shivering to death, right? And they're just casually shooting shit. Like, they're fine. We got security kicked out. I'm just sitting there in the lighthouse. You got to come in so you don't like freeze to death out here. I'm just sitting in there. This most awkward. It would be like sitting in a battalion meeting as a tab spec 4 being like, I have no fucking business being here. Like, why am I? I'd rather be out there risking my life freezing than be sitting in here like being the weird guy in the corner. But I sat in there for a couple of hours, got warmed up, and then I went out and released someone that had been sitting out there. I mean, it was fucking cold.
Yeah, I mean, that's
and
like
these guys are sitting out there freezing to death too, and I start feeling guilty. Like, now I'm sitting in here, my clothes are starting to warm up. I'm feeling all, I'm getting comfortable. And I'm like, these guys have been freezing their ass up for 3 hours. And I was like, I'm good. And I just kind of got up, and like, they're like, Waterhouse, you good? And I'm like, I'm good. Sorry. I just walked out the door, and I went and found the guy. I'm like, how long you been out here? He's like, I don't know, man, since we got here. I'm like, go fucking warm up to it. And I pulled my shift and managed to navigate that whole situation. But that was an experience. I didn't know water could get that cold.
That's what I'm saying, man. If you go back in time, I guarantee every war we've been in, like you go to Korea, you go to Normandy, there's some guys crossing over some plank somewhere on an op, and somebody falls in. And falls in. So that's why I just think somebody could watch this and just know, like, oh, I remember those days.
Been there. Yeah, I remember when the last thing I remember before I hit the water was one of the squad leaders on the other side that hadn't crossed, right? It was just the one guy and then me. And he sees me shift and he goes, whammy. And that's the last thing I remember hearing before I splashed into the water. And I was like, what a fucking asshole. That was the last thing I remember hearing before I hit the water.
But that's what you gotta love.
Shit. Whammy.
You gotta love that about the relationship. I love it.
And it's funny. I talked to him the other day, and we have a great relationship. It was, I was a PD2, he was an E6, and he's like, "Look at this asshole falling in the water," you know. But all the years later, you get old, and you realize, like, man, we were all just doing the same stuff. It didn't matter. You know? At some point, rank doesn't really matter. When you're over there in these situations, it's pretty irrelevant. Like when you're back in garrison, everybody pulls guard duty, right? Or only the privates pull guard duty. When you get over into combat, everybody pulls guard duty. No one gets a break. So everyone's doing the same thing. It's not like, oh, I'm a E6, I'm not pulling guard duty. No, you're pulling shift. We're in combat. It's different. So I mean, after a little while, you establish that relationship with them, and you land on somewhat of common ground and have somewhat of respect for each other, no matter what the rank is, really. But you gotta earn that shit. It's not any different than going through training. I mean, no one's gonna hand you this. You gotta earn your keep. And I think one of the hardest things that I learned over the years about being in SOF, being in Ranger Battalion, was there's a huge challenge to get there. I think the bigger challenge is to stay. And, to maintain that level, I think was the harder of the two, if I look back on it, in all honesty. Maintain that discipline. Yes, all of those things, and to me, that was the harder of the two challenges, looking back on it. Now, at the time, going through training was the worst, but looking back on it, staying in the battalion was the hardest, I would say.
Yeah. I've definitely heard that before from folks, especially in the tier 1 and 2 communities. I wanted to ask, that first deployment, when you fell into the water, had you already been through Ranger School, or did that come later?
No.
You had not,
that
right?
Came later.
And that's what they try to put you through to understand that pain, right?
And I remember, actually, we were on a resupply, and it was I think it was it may have been an Italian XO or something, and he ended up in our element, and we were walking back down the valley at some point, and he turned around and looked at me, and he's like, he didn't look at my rank. He's like, "Hey, you been to school yet?" And I was like, "No, sir." And he goes, "Well, don't worry, it ain't gonna be shit compared to this. Mountains won't be shit after you went through this." And as I was going through mountains, I never forgot him saying that. I was always like, "Man, I made it through Winter Strike. DeLong, Georgia can kiss my ass. I got this."
Yeah. Was it easier? I have to imagine, having gone through that, like, mentally, you got to think, I have done something harder than this. I've been in like water in the middle of winter in Afghanistan in like 12,000 feet. Like, I got this.
And I'm not going to lie. I mean, I went through, because of course I went through Ranger School after my third deployment. Actually, I'd been to Afghanistan again. Then we went to Iraq. And then as soon as we got back to Iraq, I was home for 2 weeks and went to pre-Ranger. So, I mean, I didn't even get a break. It was like bang, 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 then pre-Ranger and then Ranger School. And I ended up in Ranger School in the fucking winter. So I was in the lawn in the winter. And I'm like, really? I just came from the desert. It's 128 degrees. And now I'm freezing my ass off. It was, the temperature change was probably one of the hardest things. It was just like hot, cold. Yeah. And that, kind of takes a minute to get acclimated to. But, being from Massachusetts, I thought I had a leg up. Yeah. How cold can Georgia be? Pretty damn cold in the winter, surprisingly. Pretty damn cold.
And for people listening who aren't familiar, and you just fact check me on this, David, but going through Ranger School in the winter is even, like, it's all the same course. I get it, but you are looked at slightly differently. Like, whoa, you went through that thing in the winter.
You went through in the winter, right? Yeah. But, I would say, having gone through in the winter, looking back on it, I probably wouldn't have wanted to go through in the summer. Because, I mean, as cold as it does get in the mountains, it gets that hot in the summer with the humidity and stuff. I mean, you're looking at, 95-degree days with 90%. I mean, the windows are sweating. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know that I wanted to, walk around with swamp bats for 63 days either. So, I mean, it's like, it's kind of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other, to be honest. I don't know that at that point it really made a difference. It was like, I don't want to recycle. I just want to get my goes and get the fuck out of here. I don't want to do anything twice. And I was fortunate enough to go straight through. So
that's awesome.
But that was after my third deployment. So yeah, I was actually the enlisted honor graduate for my class.
That's no joke, man. That's
No
real good.
brag. I'm not
Yep.
kissing my own ass at all. I had been to combat 3 times at that point. So this shit was easy. It was just like, I mean, probably the biggest thing we didn't understand about Ranger School is how to lay out an op order. I mean, I'd gotten a million of them at that point, but I went through when we pulled up in the pre-ranger van to drop us off. A pre-ranger instructor, there were about 16 of us in our class that were getting dropped off, and like there's like 300 guys in the. And as you pull up in the CQ van, we all fit in one van, right? So it probably wasn't 16, it's probably about 10 of us. And he pulls up, he goes, "Hey, see all those guys out there? That's an IOBC class, infantry officer basic. So guys had done nothing. There were 300 of them. And there were like 16 bat boys tops. And they were like, that's your class."
What?
And
so you went through with all officers?
All officers, yeah.
Whoa.
And about a handful of enlisted guys. Yeah. So these guys had no experience whatsoever. And so we found out real quick, and we were like, look, you guys don't know shit about operations, but you know how to plan a mission. We don't know how to plan a damn mission, but we know how to execute it. So we found out real quick in our squad, like, you guys plan the op, we'll execute it. We'll carry you through on that end. You carry us through on the op order end. And so we just kind of came as a team, but when we pulled up there were like 300 guys in that parking lot, and I was like, this is going to be horrible. Were
you an NCO then,
there were parts
David?
of it that were. No, I went in as a PFC in the school.
Dang. 3 deployments.
After my third
they couldn't hook
deployment,
you
I
up
was still a PFC.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Just a quick word from our sponsor, 10,000, and we'll get right back to this combat story. So this advertiser asked me not to read the script, which I loved. They said instead to tell a cool story of me using their gear, which I think you can appreciate. So I wore the 10,000 tactical shorts on a hike recently, and they were perfect because they hold my phone right on my thigh so it's not bouncing around. They have a great spot for my key and credit card without any of the bulk. And they're not short like Ranger panties or SEAL shorts either, but they still have that same look. And what I love is that 10,000 works with top strength and endurance athletes, including elite vets, to co-design, test, and develop their gear so you know it's heavily vetted before it shows up at your door. You can kit up now and get 15% off your purchase. Go to 10,000.cc and enter code COMBATSTORY. That's TENTHOUSAND.cc. Enter code COMBATSTORY to get 15% off. They offer free shipping, free returns, and a lifetime guarantee. So get out there, get the highest quality, best fitting, and most comfortable training shorts you've ever worn from 10,000. And now, back to this combat story. Okay.
Say the least. But yeah, I learned a lot. So I learned to be patient a little bit more. These guys had never done anything, right? They'd only been in the schoolhouse and through the system. Had never done anything over there. So, I mean, I was watching guys cry their eyes out because they couldn't, they were tired, hungry, and they couldn't pack their rucksack up, in the morning. Or, I can't get everything back in. It's like, I'll help you pack your shit. And they're losing it over that. And I'm like, I had a similar experience on the bank of a river in Afghanistan in 2003. I made it. We can get you packed up, dude. Come on, calm down. And so it did teach me a certain level of patience. And at the same time, a massive level of impatience. Pick your shit up and shut the fuck up. Let's go. We ain't have time to bitch you. We don't have time for this. I'm trying to get my go, or I'm trying to get you your go, or sometimes I remember carrying one officer's rucksack up the side of a mountain in I think it was Darby Fades. It wasn't even a mountain, it was just a hill. He couldn't even carry his own ruck. I was like, just give it to me. He threw it on my back and I carried it up. And he walked up with nothing. We got to the top of the hill and handed his ruck back to him, and he was like, thanks, bro. And I was like, I got you. Wow. And you just do what you can to help each other. I mean, I didn't look at it any different than combat, even though they're IOBC guys. I mean, we're still in this together. And that was just kind of the general mentality that I had throughout all of it. I mean, I never looked at anybody's better or worse. We're in this shit together. We get in a gunfight, doesn't fucking matter. And so
take us, David, to the first gunfight that you find yourself in. So you've gone through all the training. You're up in the mountains in Afghanistan. When's the first time you're in contact?
First contact we got in, I was actually on guard duty. We were probably like 2 or 3 days away from getting pulled out. It was we were there for 15 days. We came back and like refitted for like maybe 24 hours or something. And then we went back out for another 15 days. So we were 12, 13 days into the second day or second 15 day rotation. And we're sitting up there, and I'm ironically enough pulling guard duty with the same guy that ran in and pulled me out of the river. And we're just sitting there talking about who gives a shit, you know, whatever you talk about when you're sitting there bored out of your mind, trying not to fall asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I just remember hearing boom. And I looked up, and I just remember seeing this. It looked like an orange ice cream cone almost. Just, we had this little itty bitty fire behind like half wall because it was still really cold up there. Then now we're into December now, and I remember seeing this bright orange ice cream cone coming up, and I remember for half a second saying, "What the?" And it was just boom, and like landed like 10, 15 meters from this small little fire that we had, and it was like the only light source in the valley. This guy had lobbed this thing up from across the valley. I mean, max effective range of an RPG, he had like exceeded that by like 2 or 3 times, and somehow like manages to like lob this thing on top of this, right? And so this rocket land, everyone's sleeping. It's just me and him up. And I just remember seeing it and just bam. And I just remember seeing all the rocks and shit fly up in the air. Whatever weapon was right next to him, he just grabbed the saw gunner's weapon and just started shooting and shit. And the saw gunner's running around like, "Where's my goddamn weapon?" And the first sergeant's like getting busy on it. You know, he don't give a shit. And so I'm like I'm trying to direct some fire. And I'm like, "Hey, man, it was over there." I'm like, "That ridge, you know, to the right side." No one was listening to me. No one could hear me over the sound of the gun. Everyone is just hammering the side of this, you know, ridge line. I mean, we got dudes shooting 203s. Yeah, what's the max effective range of it? Like 300 meters. This was like 700 meters away. They're like, boom, and these things are just falling into the valley. Like, they're not even making it. It didn't matter. Everyone's just shooting every damn thing they had. We didn't hit a damn thing. I bet we didn't hit a damn thing. We fucking spindexed on the side of that mountain, and they were probably laughing their asses off sitting behind a rock on the other side, you know. But that was the first time I ever like actually took. I mean, it was kind of IDF because it wasn't like, you know, an RPG getting shot at you from 100 yards away or 100 meters away. It was a 1 in a million shot, but it was basically IDF. But that was the first time I ever personally had taken any sort of contact, and it was pretty crazy. And we got pulled out about 2 days after that, and you know, we had fleas. We were starving to death. I lost 23 pounds in 30 days.
Dang.
We were down to like 1 MRE a day. Which we were having to walk down and use donkey trains from down. We'd have to walk down every day, load up the donkeys and walk them back up the mountain, so we could have MREs to feed us. We were 1 MRE a day, and if we were lucky, we got rice and beans from the villagers, and that was our food. And like I said, we had to walk down and fill our water up to the stream, you know, because you don't want to get like dengue and you can't drink the water, malaria, any of that shit. And then when the platypuses broke, then we're drinking iodine tablets, which if anyone's ever had that experience, pass on that. That tastes terrible.
It's really
but no, and then we got pulled out about a day or two after that. And I mean, everyone was just, when we came home, after all that, I mean, after a certain point, you know, especially when you're lean like that, right? It's not like we have a lot of fat on us to burn. And lose that much weight in that short of time, like our bodies started eating our muscles, which kind of produces a urine type smell. And when we got home, like people were like, "You smell like you pissed yourself," and it was actually just our bodies consuming our muscles for fuel just to survive. And so that was my first 30 days, and that was about the hardest 30 days I've ever had in my fucking life. And I remember getting back there and being like, "Is this how every fucking deployment is?" Because I made it through all this shit. I don't think I can do this again, bro.
Yeah.
That was rugged. And, you know, thankfully that was, you know, from a physical exertion standpoint, that was the worst one. But I mean, we caught a lot of bad ones for other reasons down the line, but that was a brutal attack on every sense of the body.
So David, I'm going to put to the side some of the more challenging ops for just a second that you kind of just alluded to.
Sure.
Across 6 deployments with Ranger Battalion, I got to imagine you did some insane stuff. Is there one or two that you remember? Are there one or two ops that you remember where you were like, this is so high speed. This is what I signed up for. I can't wait to get into this op.
Yeah,
Or I
I'd
can't
have to
believe I'm getting
say that
paid to do this.
yes, I would say that that sense probably hit me the first time when we got to Baghdad in 2004. And because we had been, Chinooks, not on Blackhawks, not on Little Birds, we didn't really do. I don't think we fast roped on either of the first two of my deployments. But when we got to Iraq in 2004, July 104, that's when shit got awesome. And I know that sounds ridiculous to someone that has no idea, but it was the most. It doesn't get any better than that. You're working with the greatest organizations that you can, the United States military, the world has to offer, and you're in support of them, and you're going on your own missions as well. And I mean, you're sitting in the door of Blackhawks, you're sitting on the skids of Little Birds. I mean, sometimes you'd roll out Humvees, but we were on hits every day. And I remember just sitting there, and I remember the first time sitting in the door of a Black. It was the first time I'd ever been in the door of a Blackhawk, and I remember sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, if someone handed me re-enlistment papers right now, I would sign up for like 30 fucking years. This is the coolest shit I've ever done in my life." Like, and it was unbelievable, just that experience of just sitting there like being like, holy shit, I'm actually doing this. And I would say that was Baghdad, because just the change of op tempo, the change of scenery, and just that urban style, and I just remembered that. I was just like, okay, I made it. This is what I wanted to do. And I'm so here. Cool, man. And that was just so exciting, and at the same time it's scary shit, but the scared shit goes away because you're with all your buddies. So like you all kind of, your fears just kind of get melted off onto the other person, vice versa, right? It's like, hey, it's shit we got to do, but at least we're going together, And so you like, dude, you don't. And it sounds silly, but I don't really remember being scared, but a handful of times. And that's not me trying to be Billy Badass or anything. It was just, I remember, and there were definitely a few times where I was scared. But I mean, it was few and far between. The majority of it was just straight adrenaline. I mean, it was mainlining adrenaline. And as a 21, 22-year-old kid, I mean,
you live off that.
You live off. I mean, yeah, right. You're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Now I'm old and I don't even like to go up on a 6-foot ladder. You know what I mean?
Tell me about
it. I might fall off this and hurt myself. I might roll an ankle. Back then you're like, yeah, fuck this.
Can you take us through, because the op tempo is very different from my understanding, obviously, from what you're doing in Afghanistan, as you said, like clearing grid squares, basically, to what sounds like regular hit cadence.
Direct action raids.
Direct action. Mm-hmm. Could you just, without nothing classified, obviously, and you don't have, like, maybe an HVT hit, if you could just talk through, like, when you're going through that, what was it like for you on one of these ops? Where were you in the stack? What was your role? And kind of take us through one of those.
So, I mean, it varies. It just kind of depends sometimes on, as far as like your position in the stack. A lot of it depends on like, what bird you're in, right? Because, a lot of times if you were going in on Blackhawks, there'd be 4 birds, and 3 birds, at least, 2 birds, very minimum. And so, whoever landed first and got up to the wall was kind of like who was going to flow through first. I mean, if there was an exterior wall breach or something like that, that would be handled. And then once we got into the compound, because a lot of things people don't understand, stateside is, we have like fences in our backyard. So like, we don't have to watch our dogs. We can just let them outside. These people have like 8-foot tall cement walls around their houses. So like, you get up to the house, you're not in the house. You gotta, get through the wall just to get to the damn door. So, you get through that breach, and then whoever kind of got up there, and your order in the stack just kind of depended on just the flow of everyone going through. I mean, it wasn't, hey, you're going to be here, 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 here. It's just kind of, you just have to
fall in, like,
you just kind of
what's
flow
happening.
in. Yeah. Once you get on target like that, it's controlled chaos. But you've done this, you trained so many times, you've been through so many shoot houses, you've done so many breaching, drills and all this. And it just kind of becomes second nature. And, you just kind of flow in and you get to that breach, if it's a mechanical breach or a ballistic breach, explosive breach, whatever it is. And, once the door's gone, it's just kind of, be on that guy's ass. And you're just on that guy's ass in front of you. And, hey, I'm right here. And I mean, I remember guys trying to fight to get to the front, and it was like, back up, hey, you're getting in my fucking way now, right? Like,
why are they fighting to get to the front?
Everybody wants to be the first person to, I'm going to walk in this room, I want to get to smoke this dude or whatever. And it's like, you're actually fucking the whole element up here. Just calm down. You got to chill for a second. Like I said, it's got to be controlled chaos. It can't be chaos. There's a huge difference between the two. So, that was it. And like I said, it was so much different than Afghanistan. When you're in villages, you're much more remote. You're kicking in shacks, like little adobe mud huts or so, basically. And now you're hitting fixed structures and you're in a city. And, one of the things that you probably alarmed me the most initially when we got there was everyone can fucking hear what you're doing. Afghanistan, you blow a breach in the middle of the night, the next closest village may be 5 clicks down the valley. Yeah, and they may have heard the breach. But by the time they do anything and get there, you're gone. You blow a breach in Iraq, the neighbor might fucking get up on his roof and fire an RPG down into the next house. Everyone knows what you're doing in the whole neighborhood. I mean, you blow a breach, you hear car windows shatter. And so you just under that constant, you get there, if we came in by helo, obviously they're going to know we're there. Sometimes, with vehicles, we'd, kind of stage them far back from the objective, what we called a VDO, vehicle drop-off, and we would dismount and walk up so we could, have some stealth as we got closer to the houses, not trying to burn ourselves. But, you land in a helicopter in someone's front lawn, they fucking know you're there. I mean, there's no secret. We just landed 3 helos in a compound, hey, what's up? There's no surprise here. And everyone around you knows it's coming or that it's happening. And I remember that being real nerve-wracking for me. Just, it wasn't so much the target house, because we crushed the target house so fast that, it's over before it starts for the most part. 99% of the time it's over before anybody can even react. It's when you're doing your SSC and your interrogation stuff and you're sitting there on target, knowing that the whole neighborhood knows you're there. So when we come walking these guys out, is someone going to be on the roof of an RPG, RPK, AK? Have they, started placing IEDs on the street, on our exfil route? And it just gave them more time, which is why our hits were so fast. Probably from infill to exfil in that time frame, we were 10, 12 minutes.
Jeez.
And we were out. Get the fuck out. Before the entire city collapses on. And so that, it was, you're in, you're out, you get your dude, and you get on the birds, you get the Humvees, and you bounce. And otherwise, you're sitting ducks. You are outnumbered. Believe me, you're outnumbered. Everywhere you go, you're outnumbered. Thank God for air support. I will say that.
Did you ever?
I would not be here without CAS.
Did you ever fast rope onto a target?
Yeah, we did a lot of fast ropes in Baghdad. Most of them for about between 15 to 30 feet, probably tops. Most of that shit was just to avoid power lines and stuff like that. So that with that at that length, no big deal. My longest one was 85 footer.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah, it was. I think I actually say in the documentary, I was on that rope so long I had time to think about shit, which is not usually the case. We were we were on an infill in Afghanistan in 2005, and it was actually the Operation Redwings recovered, where that Chinook got shot down going to provide QRF for the 4-man SEAL element. And we had flown in the first night, and it was too foggy. We couldn't see anything, so they turned us around. And the next night, we were headed back out. And, these guys, we don't know, these guys are alive, dead. I remember sitting up on the roof with a fellow team leader. And I'd smoked early on in my military career, and then I went to dip it. And because you can't smoke on an objective, right? You got to pop a lip in, no problem. So everybody was dipped, and I remember we were sitting up there, and after we got turned around, going to infill the first night, and we were sitting up on the rooftop in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, and me and my buddy had both quit smoking, and we bummed a cigarette from an Afghani National Army guy, and we're sitting up on the rooftop smoking, and the Chinook's been on the ground for about 24 hours, roughly, maybe 30 hours. 24 hours. And we're waiting for the next cycle of darkness. The sun's going down, beautiful sunset. We're passing the cigarette back and forth. And I looked at him, I take a drag off the cigarette and I pass it to him. And I look at him and I said, this is one of my best friends in the world. And still is. I look at him, I said, you know, we're going to fucking die tonight, right? And he takes a drag off the cigarette and he puts it on the ground and he stomps it out with his boot. And he said, yeah, let's go get this shit over with. And we went down and we got down on the tarmac and we waited for the cycle of darkness. And turbines kicked on. And we got on the Chinook and it's like, all right, here we go. And so we fly back and we get to about the same point. And keeping in mind, a bird has been shot down. We have potentially 20 people, may or may not be alive. And they know we're coming. They know we're going to come get our guy. And we got there and there was another huge mountain rainstorm that had blown through that night. And when usually like crew chiefs kick the ropes, they check the rope, you know, they see that, okay, rope's on the ground, give the rope masters like, you're good. Rope masters give themselves a thumbs up and then rope out. But it was so damn foggy and the tree height was high enough that when they kicked the ropes out, no one could see the bottom of the rope. And I was the second guy in line on the left side of the aircraft, right side as you're facing out the back. And so I'm standing right behind the rope master on my side, and I'm watching the rope master on the other side and my guy communicate with each other. The crew chief's just screaming, go, go, go. And the rope masters are trying to identify if the bottom of the rope is on the ground. They can't see it. And because we cracked at the bottom, so you can just see from up there. And I remember, I remember looking at each other and one guy shrugging his shoulders and I could see his mouth, even in the pitch black, and he said, fuck it, and roped out. And I was like, I remember grabbing the rope as I'm swinging out to clear my gear and I'm like, fuck it. And I'm on the rope and we're down and I'm just like, oh, and like my hands are on fire. My freaking boots are like the rubber's melting. And I remember being like, I've never been on a rope even half this long. And I was like, one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to fall off this rope in about half a second or I'm about to hit the ground. And I just spread my feet shoulder width apart and boom, I landed on the ground. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. And as soon as that, I didn't say it out loud, it was in my head. And as soon as that thought came out of my head, the saw gunner behind me came rifling down the rope, chop blocks the back of my legs out, and I just start tumbling down the damn hill. Right? I don't know. We could be on the side of a 2,000-foot drop. Right? I don't know. I'm just tumbling down the side of this mountain. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And but yeah, they gave us the full length of the rope, about an 85-footer. That was memorable, to say the least.
And do you have gloves on when you're doing that in combat?
Yeah, we had like leathers.
Yeah.
Right. Like leather work gloves, like you would buy from Lowe's almost.
Okay.
Like leather work gloves. Like a short rope you can do in kind of like a thin skin glove, almost like a shooting glove. You can get away with it. I mean, I never recommend it. But yeah, even then, guys had blisters on their fingers that were, I mean, just an inch. I mean, just fluid from just the friction. And it was, that was a rope.
Dang.
80
well,
at least 85 feet.
Let's talk Redwings too here.
Okay.
You've touched on a little bit of it, and we've interviewed Tony Brooks, who I think you also said that you knew.
Oh, I know Tony. I actually spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, he's a great man.
Great guy. And so very similar discussion here, but for people who don't remember that interview, could you give some context to what Redwings is, as difficult as it is to talk about? Because the setup is really important.
Sure. So Redwings was And operation, it was initially a 4-man, like basically a reconnaissance SEAL element, operating right around Assad at Afghanistan. And they had been searching out for this warlord that had been kind of in that area, and they were trying to get eyes on so that they could, kind of eliminate that threat, because he was conducting, insurgency attacks all kind of throughout the region. So they were on a recce mission to kind of get eyes on him so that we could eliminate that threat. While doing that, they were compromised. And so they ended up having to basically E&E, escape and evade, and try to, get to some sort of cover where they could call for QRF. Well, they wasn't even covered to call for QRF. It was so hard to get a radio signal out there because of the mountains. It's not like, grabbing a cell phone here and making a phone call. It's like, sometimes like the radio transmissions just don't go through. And so they're out there trying to get radio transmissions. And one of the SEALs, actually, I think he was awarded the Medal of Honor, kind of stepped out on a rock, like kind of out in the open, and was able to get a radio transmission through. Like, hey, troops in contact, location, blah, blah, blah. And what that ended up doing is it spun up QRF, their own QRF, which was another 8-man SEAL element. Well, there were 4 on the ground, so this would have been 8 additional SEALs. And there were 160th guys. They were part of the helicopter crew chiefs, pilots, door gunners, stuff like that. They launched on that to go provide QRF for that 4-man SEAL element. Upon their insertion, they were going to have to do a Fastrope, and not a 85-footer, maybe a 30, 40-footer. And as they kind of leveled off and unsnapped to go get on the rope, an RPG came in through the back of the open ramp and struck the Chinook on the inside. And when that happened, the bird kind of spun around, and centrifugal force, because the SEALs had unsnapped a rope, and kind of threw them out of the back of the helicopter, probably about 40, 50 feet up in the air. And then the bird kind of rotated and almost inverted and slammed it inside the mountain. We were sitting in our hooches in a bog room. We were actually playing Tiger Woods' Dream 18. I'll never forget. And it's me and 2 of my other team leader friends. And one of our squad leaders from a different squad kicked the door, and he's like, "Hey, get your shit on. Bird just got shut down outside of the bed." And so we everybody kits up. We meet it right outside of our hooches. And they had to start making cuts because of the elevation. So a lot of guys actually from our platoon didn't get an opportunity to go on this just from weight. And so we get it cut down to where we needed to be. They put us on Chinooks on the Bagram Air Force airfield, and they fly us to Jalalabad, which is where we were going to infill that night to go to do that, which was the first night that we went to go infill, and we got turned around. So we get there, we're trying to collect as much intel as we can through imagery and stuff like that. We don't see anyone moving on the ground. Then that night we launch, we get turned around, we come back. And then the next night is when we went out. We had the 85-foot rope, and we rope into the mountain. And we start walking towards where the crash site was. And it was an all-night. I mean, the terrain was rugged. And, it was a huge mountain rainstorm. One of my best friends was walking point right in front of me, my fellow team leader. And we were about 15 minutes in. And he stopped on this little tiny ridge we were on. I bumped into the back. And then we're wearing night vision. I couldn't even see him. He was 2 feet in front. Slammed into the back. It's like, "Oh shit, sorry." He's like, "Dude, I need you to walk up here with me. I can't see a fucking thing." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So we walk side by side on point, which usually points one gap. No, it was a 2-man job tonight.
Was there just no loom, David? Was that it?
No, there was the loom was 0. You could not see a damn thing. And so we just kind of, the thing about Afghanistan is there's only so many ways you can get somewhere. There's trails, there's stuff, but you don't go off the beaten path, because that's why it's the beaten path. If you go off of it, you may, that may be it. So as we walked that, we circled around. It took us all night, but we got there right as day broke. And I remember my platoon, it was just at dawn. And my platoon sergeant kind of got to the edge, and the crash site was on a minimum 45-degree angle downhill. And so we get to that edge, and my platoon starts like, "Hey, hold squad, like let me go just take a look at this." And he kind of goes over and he kind of gets to the crest of that ridge line, or to the top of that hill, and he looks down and he can see some bodies and stuff. And he kind of turns around, he comes back to us, and he was like, "All right, you're never gonna fucking forget this day, but it's just gonna be a fucking son of a bitch, but we got to get it done." And so we kicked out security. And then there were about 15, maybe 20 of us tops. We dropped our plate carriers, our kit or whatever, kept our weapons on us. And, we kind of crested the hill and we began body recovery probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And that lasted all day. We had hoped that we would find, some live soldiers, crew members down there, but we didn't. Everyone was dead. And it was just, even after this is my fourth deployment at this point. It's not like I was a rookie. And but I just remember cresting that hill and just the carnage. I mean, it didn't even look like a helicopter. I mean, the only thing that was recognizable was like some rotor blades. And we just began doing body recovery, and that lasted all day. The SEALs, they were unsnapped, were thrown from the back. All the crew of the Chinook, they stay snapped in, and so they unfortunately rode the helicopter into the side of the mountain, and so they were pretty severely burned. Most of the SEALs were relatively intact, minus the fall, and it's not like you're falling on sand. I mean, it's all rocks and jagged earth. And so we got down there, and we started policing up guys and just putting them in bags and carrying them up the side of this terrible hill. And we had no water. They told us to be there for 6 hours just to go police up the crash site. I mean, in the end, not to skip forward, but we were there for like 13 days. And so we had no water, anything like that. But I mean, you couldn't stop. You just put a guy in a bag, carry him up the hill, put a guy in a bag, carry him up the hill. And, some of the guys that were part of the crew of the Chinook, they were burnt. And what happens to a body like anything, it's burnt, it gets rigid, right? So in order to get some of these guys in the bags, we were having to do some god-awful things to get them in there. Having to snap limbs, break arms off, and so they could fit. One guy's head rolled off his body while we were trying to put him in a bag. And then, so we did that all day. One of the guys we came across actually was a SEAL. It was me, my platoon sergeant, and another Ranger buddy of mine, great friend of mine to this day. And we kind of stumbled upon this guy. He was laying down, like face down, like head pointed down, towards the base of the mountain. And he had a hole in the top of his helmet that had penetrated his skull as well. And, his brain was kind of oozing out of the top of that, into the little creek that was running down there. And we went to go roll him over. And as we rolled him over, and we knew like Taliban and Al Qaeda or someone had been there. I mean, it had taken us almost 36 hours to get there because of the weather delay. And as we rolled him over, I was kind of standing on the downslope looking up. And we rolled him, and I remember just watching a fucking hand grenade fall out of his kit. And it just kind of tumbled like a couple fucking rocks down and landed like literally almost right in between the three of us, who were all like, 2 or 3 meters apart. And I just looked at both of them and I was like, grenade. And we all just kind of and waited for it to go off. And after about 5-6 seconds, it hadn't gone off. And everybody kind of slowly opening their eyes up and were looking around at each other. And we thought it was a booby trap. It had just fallen out of the SEAL's kit. But, we thought, oh, here we go. That's it. Last faces I'll ever see. And so he disposed of the grenade, and we got him in a body bag and got him, back up
David,
to the top of the hill.
Real quick on that one, how come y'all didn't run and hit the deck?
There was nowhere to run to. The terrain was so jacked. There was nowhere to go.
As you're describing this carnage, and we had a crew that flew into the ground during a gunnery exercise, and I didn't go out on the crash site, but some of my very close friends did. And to this day, I think they're scarred from it, to put it.
It's the most awful thing I've ever seen in my
life. Is there anything that someone could have said to you before you got onto that crash site that could have prepared you or helped you in some way? There's nothing.
No. That is one of the few situations that I've encountered in my life where there's no preparation for something that you're going to encounter like that. It just comes down to the man. And I just remember looking around and no one balked. No one hesitated. It was just let's get this fucking shit done. And that was it. No one hesitated. It was just, this is what we got to do. And, I remember doing that and just being man, if it was me, I don't want someone out here doing this for me.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of it was unspoken though. No one said it to the man. It was just kind of an unspoken thing. We got to go get. And, you just have an obligation to these people. And that's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. You hear about people have a bad day at work. You don't know what a bad day is. You have to be willing to die for this. Right? That's part of the fucking job. Is to go into these situations knowing that you may not come back either. And that's what the country expects out of SOF. That's what they expect out of Army Ranger. Is to go into those situations and make the best out of what's left. And it's unfortunately the terrible part of the job, but it's part of the job. So it's an unspoken thing. It was we got to get these guys home. And if that means that we lose some of our guys, we lose some of our guys. And we'll get them home too. And that's the reality of the situation. And no, to answer your question, there's nothing anyone can say to prepare you for that. It's just one of those scenes. It's just, you take it in, it lives with you for all of your days, and you do the best to honor the memory of the guys that, don't have the privilege to sit here like I do to be able to talk to you, right? This is for all of them, all of us, to be able to honor and their legacy, their memory.
Without, sorry for being blunt here, but did you end up having trauma because of that?
Oh yeah.
Or was it before that and this was the nail in the coffin?
Yeah. I didn't realize that we had, shades of PTSD, because living in the barracks, you get up and go pee or something at 3:00 in the morning, you pass two dudes, one's still drinking and the other one's, finished shaving his head because it's Monday morning. So you don't realize how abnormal your sleep schedule is. It wasn't until I got out that I realized, what do you mean people aren't up at 4:30?
Yeah.
And so, we had that already from the other deployments. But if you want to put the proverbial nail in the coffin,
that was it.
That was it. June 30th, the morning of June 30th, 2004, will live in infamy in my mind. Never go away.
And it didn't end there,
but,
right?
I also don't want it to.
Yeah.
As fucked up as that sounds, I don't want it to go. Because I want it to remind me every day how fortunate I am to be.
One of the things that I often think back on, just some near-death experiences I have had, but I haven't had what you just described, that type of carnage, is I remember coming back from an op where I thought I was I just couldn't believe I made it out. And I got back and I hopped out of the aircraft and I was like, Jesus, I'm on the ground. I can't even believe I'm alive. And for a moment there, I was thinking and even to this day, I know I have a new perspective on life because of that moment, but it fades a little bit with time, if that makes sense. Over time, you distance from that. So to your point though, of hey, you've never had a bad day. I will remember that day, but I have to consciously think back to, like, do you remember when that RPG almost took me out of the sky? Or, you know, those rounds didn't bring us down. But it's not this easy, like, lease on life where I just feel carefree and, you know, it kind of fades, I think.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's actually funny you bring that up. I had a wonderful 10 days. I had 5 appliances in my house literally shut down in 10 days, like a week ago. This happened like the last one. Yeah, I had my refrigerator go down, my hot water heater, my HVAC unit, and microwave. And I was able to get 2 of them fixed about $2,000 in. And I had a repair guy come out yesterday. And he was like, your fridge is done. You got to get a new one. I'm like, there's another $1,100, $1,200, right? He's like, your microwave's probably fucked too. And I'm like, there's another $200. And I'm sitting on the porch, and I have my wife was on the way back with our kids. And I'm sitting there, I just kind of have my head in my hand, just like shaking my head, like, man, I cannot get a break. And she comes in, she gets the kids in. She's like, how bad? I was like, catastrophic. She was like, perfect. So she goes and gets the kids settled, comes out. I'm still sitting out there, and she puts her hand on my shoulder. And she was like, it's going to be all right. And my initial instinct was to look at her and be like, no, the fuck it isn't. Like, and I looked at her, and it snapped. And it snapped back in my head. And I looked at her, and I was like, you know what? And I looked out, and I'm sitting on my front porch, and I'm staring out. No one's trying to kill me. I'm not getting rocketed. I'm not getting mortared. I'm not worried about stepping on an IED. And I looked out, and I was like, you know what? I've had days that were 10,000 times harder than today. And I think that perspective makes it, and then when you do have the ability to be able to recall that, not necessarily going through all the details per se, but to be able to look back and be like, this isn't a hard day. Yeah, it's an inconvenience. It's a pain in the ass. It's going to be money, but fuck, I'm sitting in an Adirondack chair in my house. Could be a hell of a lot worse. And so, like, I think one of the reasons why I do, and one of the reasons why we included that in the documentary, not only is it historically important, but it's important to me because it reminds me on those days when I'm having a shit day to keep fucking walking. That you know what those guys would give to have one more day?
Yeah.
And I always try to remember.
It's so hard, man. It's so hard to think on that. I mean, one of the things that hurt me the most, not the near-death experiences, it was when I was back home and I knew my boys were downrange again, and I was sitting there at a barbecue, you know, like that I wasn't there helping them, and I had this easy life now. You know, it's so hard to think back.
It's the guilt, you know, and you're like, what if something happens and I'm not there? And you know, one of the fortunate things that happened to me while I was in, I was on every single mission, every single one that our platoon, never missed one. I was in danger of missing one in Afghanistan in 2004, and I was still. I mean, this is my second deployment, but they were like, "Hey, you know, it's wait," and I got cut. And it was like everyone else went. I was like the only cut, which I couldn't figure out because I didn't do anything wrong. I'm like, why me? You know, they're like, it's your turn or something. You know, and I'm like, so I'm sitting in this GP medium at Fob Salerno, just walking around in circles. And everybody's gone. And they were going to get on Chinooks to go launch on this target. And I was there, and it's like 25, 30 minutes. I can't sit still. I'm just walking, pacing back and forth like a sentry, walking over his own footsteps, just over and over and over. And all of a sudden, the door to the GP medium flap opens up, and all the guys come piling back in. I'm like, that was quick. And they're like, mission got canked. I was like, oh, fucking thank God. Like, if something had happened and I wasn't there, I would have been devastated, right? And that was the only mission that I wasn't going to be on, and we didn't end up going on. So, like, to speak to your point about that, you're sitting at a barbecue and you know your boys are still out there on the streets and in the sky and doing their thing and supporting the effort. That would have been if I had not been on a mission and something had happened, that probably would be 10 times harder for me to deal with than having it happen while I was on.
For sure. Yeah.
And, I if it's going to happen, I want to be.
Yeah.
I'll take the long-term shit, but I would have been devastated.
Yeah.
If at least I wasn't on the ground. And so I was very fortunate. And that was the only one I was kinked from.
That is a great one, man.
The whole mission got kinked. So I consider myself, strangely enough, in the eyes of most people that are, civilians listening to this, I was really lucky. I didn't get kinked from, the mission.
But all the vets get it, man. All the vets hear that and they're like, yep, that's what you want to be on all the ops, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So no, I was fortunate to, but I have had, the war never ends. I've had a lot of guys since I got out that, I found out were killed over there, after we left. And, it never gets any easier.
No. I mean, I wanted to talk just a little bit about your last mission that you were on, the last engagement.
Pump House.
Let's talk
the Pump House. Okay. So I was slated to get out December 21st, 2006 was my ETS date. And we redeployed. This is the second time to Ramadi. The first trip was a scene. Fallujah was hard. Ramadi was worse. And we were all the team leaders from the first Ramadi trip had gone on to other things. Some went to other programs within the regiment. Some got out. I was like the last remaining team leader. And I got made into a weapons squad leader, even though I was an E5 and we had 3 E6s in the platoon. I had been with weapons squad and had a rapport with those guys. So they were like, my platoon sergeant was like, House, just take over weapons until your replacement comes in. And so I shouldn't have really been deployed. I think we left in. I think I went Advon like September 29th or something. And I just remember being like,
wow,
I should be going through the ETS process right now. And they redeployed me again for my 6th trip. And so I got there like 29 September. And so it was 11 December. So I'm getting or 10 December. I'm getting the Army in like 11 days and I'm still in Ramadi. And my platoon sergeant, who one of my favorite humans on the planet. I love this man to death. He's like a big brother / father figure to me. And it's funny, he was only like 2 or 3 years older than us, but he seemed like a parent. I
love that, dude. I love it.
And he comes up to me and, we had some new team leaders that had taken over because everyone left. So he was like, hey, this might get a little hairy on this one. He was like, can you come with me? And I was like, Sergeant, I got out of the Army in like 11 fucking days. I don't even think I was using rank at this point. I don't think I called him Sergeant. I think I called him by his first name. I was like, Jay, I got out of the Army in fucking 10 days. And he's like, I need you. And I was like, I'll come with you. I was like, I just want you to know if I get fucking killed, it's on you. And we both kind of laughed about it. I was like, I saw this movie. I get shot. And he was like, House, I got you. I'm like, I know, bro. I know. So we get on these boats, like these super high-speed boats, armed to the teeth, miniguns, 50 cals, and I think the SWIC, I believe is the acronym. And these things were armed to the teeth. So we're going down the Euphrates River on the way to infill into this pump house, which was these insurgents had been using it. And so they were like burying weapons next to it. So, one of the things in Iraq is every household's allowed to have 1 AK per household. That's just standard to be able to protect yourself against all the bullshit over there. But so all their caches, they would bury, and they would go dig them up in the morning. They go conduct their attacks, and then they go bury them in the evening and then go home. So if their houses got raided, it's like, hey, I only got 1 AK. And so they got wise. We got wise too. And so they infilled us by boat. And I remember one of the nerve-wracking things about that was they were starting to get wise, and they were IEDing the choke points, the narrow points in the river. And I remember just going down. These boats are going like 50, 60 miles an hour.
Those boats are badass too.
Oh, they're fucking amazing.
They're badass. When you're on that thing, you're like, this is some cool shit. Right?
I was like, this is pretty cool. I was like, I hope we don't get blown up going through this choke point, because none of us are going to survive this, because we're all just going to fucking sink to the bottom of the Euphrates River. Like, they'll be doing rescue operations, dredging the bottom of the Euphrates, pulling us up. And they gave us like these little life jackets. I think it was for like moral support or something, but like they were like Snoopy life jackets. Like you get like one arm through it, and that was it. And we're like, yeah, this isn't going to do shit, right? Like, if we get blown up, we're all going to die. But we made it there safely. We disembarked the boat. We get off. It's still nighttime, so we kind of going around looking in the areas where we had seen, them kind of searching around. Real hard to see. It's kind of bushy being by the river. And so we're like, we dug a few places. We couldn't find much. So we fall back into this pump house. And, there's two separate elements. There's us at the pump house, and then we pushed another element forward. And there was this market there that was bad news bears. I don't want to compare it to Somalia, Bakara market, but it was along those lines. And we pushed one element up to this house that was kind of like right near that market. And no one was like, we pushed snipers out, we put camera on the roof, and we just waited for these, guys to come dig their weapons up. So everyone's just kind of behind the walls. No one knows we're there. And we're sitting there, and I'm in this bathroom with my platoon sergeant. We're just kind of leaning up against the opposite sides of the wall. It's about 7:30 in the morning. We have snipers. We got cameras. There's like 12, 13 guys in this compound. And then me and him sitting in the bathroom right when you come in. And I'm sitting closest to the door, and, we're looking, and all of a sudden this silhouette shows up in the door. I think it's one of the guys just coming over to be like, hey, ask a question or something. I look up, and it's an Iraqi gentleman who had walked straight through the gate of the pump house. Somehow the cameras didn't see him, the snipers didn't see him. I look up, and I'm like, I jump up. I'm like, oh, shit. I jump up, and my platoon sergeant's like, where the fuck did he come from? And I'm like, I'm like grabbing him by the back and like trying to put him on the ground to get control. I'm like, I have no idea. Like, dude just showed up. And I mean, if he had a gun, we were both done. We wouldn't even have been able to see it coming. It would just whack done. But he was just a pump house operator. So we get him up, we move him into this other room inside the pump house, and our interrogator starts talking to him. As that happens, we get a radio call from the snipers outside, and they're like, hey, a vehicle just showed up with 3 packs inside. And, my platoon starts like, all right, just, monitor. And he's like, they're starting to dig. And we're like, oh, okay. All right, it's about to go game on. And then they're like, hey, they just pulled out an RPK. They just pulled out a couple of RPGs. All right, we got AKs. And my platoon sergeant was like, all right. And they were suppressed with subsonic ammo, which for the civilians out there that don't know, it basically sounds like you're shooting a BB gun. And they were kind of standing, side by side, all 3 of them. And they're like, all right, take shots. So the 2 snipers hit the guys on the outside, and they kind of started taking off running. The guy in the middle takes off running. The 2 guys that they shot, like dead center mass, made it like 20, 30 meters. I don't know, probably not even that far, and just like collapsed and died. They didn't know they were dead yet, like pure adrenaline, and then they just collapsed. But the 3rd guy, we kind of came out of the pump house at that point in time, engaged him, and dropped him. We kind of moved the bodies out of the way, moved the car, reburied the weapons, and then fell back into the pump house, because we knew there were more than one group that was coming there. It wasn't just these 3 guys. So we reburied the shit, moved the car, and we're like, all right, waiting on round 2. And right about that time, we get another radio call from the house up by the market and say, hey, there's a fucking car screaming down this dirt road towards you guys. And they thought it was a V-bid. So they engaged the car from that house to stop the vehicle. The vehicle stops. Now, keep in mind, it's about 8 o'clock at this point. So the market is now open. So when they engage that car and then they come out of the house to clear the car, we're still in the pump house. No one knows we're there. But now that house by the market is now burned. So they come get the guy out of the car, and they fall back to the pump, or to their house by the market. And then all of a sudden, the world knew we were there. And they just started lighting that house by the market up. And like, we probably had like 10, 12 guys in there. There were about 10, 12 of us in the pump house. So The enemy, I'm going to have to use my hands here just for reference. The enemy is shooting this way at this house, thinking that's the only enemy that they have. But we're over here by the river on their flank, where they do not know we are. So when they start to engage the house, we all kind of get up, and we had some ladders in there. We put machine gunners up on the ladders, and there was this little concrete slab that you could stand on your tippy toes and just get your barrel over and engage. And they had no idea what we were doing. And their entire flank was exposed to us. And we killed a shitload of people. And then they got wise, obviously, at that point, to that we were there. We lost our air support. I'm not going to name a branch, but a different branch was flying for us. I'm not here to make enemies. I'm not here to make enemies, bro. A different branch was flying for us, and they were taking some just small arms fire from the ground, and they were like, "Hey, we got to fuck out of here." They bounced. We have no way out, right? We have a house in a river and a market that is really fucking pissed off at us right now.
Were there like boats on QRF? Was that your exfil?
Our exfil was going to happen at dark. We didn't have exfil.
Yeah.
We were there until the cycle of darkness. We were there all day with nowhere to go. The market or the river or sit in this house. And then that's when the mortars started coming in. And they started lobbing mortars at the pump house that we were in. Like that went on all day. They're lobbing mortars. Some of them are landing short. Some of them are going over our head and exploding in the river. And this just happened all day long. And I remember we had a mortar guy with us, actually. He was a sniper at this point, but he had been a mortar guy before that. And I remember asking him, I was like, I'm not going to say his name, obviously, but I was like, hey, bro, I was like, if one of these mortars lands in this compound with these, 8-10 foot walls, like, what's the damage? And he was like, oh, we're all fucking dead. I was like, okay, that's great. So now you're in a crapshoot, right? Like, I hope one of these assholes doesn't get lucky. And that's really what it came down to all day, from like 9 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. We just got mortared, just hoping one of them didn't land the compound. And I remember it was right at about maybe 45 minutes to an hour before dusk. And why I decided to do this, I have no idea. But I looked at another one of my boys who had been there. He was the only remaining team leader that, from the original group of us from Ramadi 1. I was like, you know what? Fuck it, man. I'm out of here tomorrow. Probably the worst mission to do this on, right? I'm like, it's my last fucking mission. Fuck it. I said, I'll pull one more guard shift. He's like, I'll pull it with you, bro. Let's go. So me and him are up on the roof. We're leaning up against like this, kind of air conditioning HVAC conduit, something like that. And we sit there, we pull our shift, completely uneventful. And I look at my watch, and I'm like, that was my last guard shift in the Army, bro. And he was like, fuck yeah. We nugget. We both turn around and stand up. We're shoulder to shoulder. My right shoulder is literally touching his left shoulder. And we stand up right at dusk, and single shot. Sniper went right between the two of our heads. And the only reason we knew it went between the two of our heads is because I went for my right ear and he went for his left ear. It ripped right between us, touching shoulders. And we dropped down to the fucking roof. And I remember screaming, like, I am so tired of getting fucking shot at. And our first sergeant was down in the compound in the pump house. And I remember him yelling up at us, God damn it, that's why we wear helmets. It wouldn't have mattered if we were wearing a damn Mitch or not. You know what I'm saying? It would have blown right through that Mitch and canoed our head. But he had to say something. It was like a parent scared for his children, which I love to.
Yep.
And we get down from the roof, and we waited for darkness. And then the boats came back and picked us up, and we rode back to the fob in Ramadi. And I got off the boat, and I was like, that was it.
Dude,
and
how good did that feel, man?
I honestly, it was bittersweet. I was relieved that it was done in a way, and I was heartbroken to leave at the same time, for the same reason that you brought up earlier about being in a barbecue. and knowing your guys were still over there. I came back 2 or 3 weeks before the actual full deployment ended. And so the whole time I was getting out, ETSing. Well, I had 9 days to ETS from that, but and then driving across the country, I knew while I was doing all that my boys were still out on hits every night, and that was really hard. And you know that, in my opinion, and I'm sure everybody has a difference of opinions, but one of the hardest things for me was it was the first time in all those years I'd ever been alone.
Yeah.
I had never been alone. I mean, you don't go to the bathroom by yourself over there. You know, you got someone that pulls security for you. You know, I mean, you're never alone. And all of a sudden I was just completely by myself. And I think that was one of the hardest things that I had to deal with. You know, there's no support network. No. You know, you can't just, you know, knock on your buddy's door and be like, hey, you want you? Hey, I can't sleep. You want to play Madden or something? It's just you. And that was probably the hardest part about getting out. It's just the loneliness. And I didn't even realize I was lonely until I was lonely. You know, you don't realize how much you know, these people are just your entire world.
That is so true, man. I think we gravitate to this idea of PTSD, but that transition is a beast for so many people.
Oh, it was horrible. It was the worst year of my life. Worst year of my life.
Damn.
And yeah, I lost an amazing relationship because of it. And that was my fault. Had a drinking problem, just trying to cope. Yeah, that's on me too. You know, I'm not proud of those things, but they happen. And I know they happen to a lot of guys. You know, I'm not alone. And I think one of the reasons why you know I felt the need to talk about that at the end of the doc was just so people know, like, hey, man, it's not just you. You know, it's a lot of us, you know, that have that transition and then, you know, lose relationships that are important, you know, and fall to substance abuse and, God forbid, the, you know, the worst of the alternatives, you know.
Yeah.
Because we've had that happen too. And so it's, you know, our purpose for this, you know, I don't think it was, you know, the intent starting out, but now, you know, our Sean and I's biggest thing for this is just, if we can help one guy.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole mission's become about at this point.
No doubt. I
mean, help one more. Just help one more. Just help one more.
I'm confident it's helped more than one. So I guess just as we wrap up here, David, just one thing I would say to people listening or watching, check out Ranger, not just like for the sake of saying it for David, but like if you've listened this far and you watch Combat Story, you're going to love this documentary. I mean, it's what we talked through and more of these stories and more depth, and then the pictures to go along with it. You will not be disappointed, and it's definitely going to help people. Again, like it's your story, but it's the story of so many other people who went through.
It's all of our story.
Different war zones,
and, you know,
but
and that's what became so evident. It's so much bigger than us. Yeah. So much bigger than me. It's for everyone. Everyone that's ever gone over there and cut the teeth for this country, it's their story too.
Yeah. And there's two questions I ask everybody, David, before I let you out of here.
Sure.
One is there anything you carried with you when you were downrange that had sentimental value, something that someone gave you, but you just wanted to have it on you or close by?
My girlfriend, the one that was with me the whole time I was in, it's probably the only thing I brought with me on all 6 deployments, other than my Red Sox hat.
Yeah.
Was she gave me St. Christopher, and I always carried that with me. I brought that with me, and she would chew my ass. She's like, "You bringing that?" I'm like, "I already packed it." She would always make sure I had that with me. So I didn't bring it on missions, but I always had it, you know, in my hooch and my little AO in there. So that was the one thing, other than my Red Sox hat. Yeah,
and the Sox cap. I like that.
Yeah, and the Sox cap.
Awesome. And then second question, you mentioned this actually early on when we were recording, but I try to ask everybody after everything you went through, especially with Redwings too, the carnage, but the sacrifice on other ops and missions and the people you lost along the way and since, would you go back and do that again?
I wouldn't. I always, to me, that's a complicated question, and it probably should be a easier question to answer, but to me, it's kind of a double-sided question. I would not trade 1 second of my time that I put in. I would not trade the relationships that I formed, the bonds I formed, the emotional things that happen. But if I had a crystal ball and I could see down the future from when I signed those papers and went in about all of the things, not just the injuries, but the unseen injuries and all of those things, I don't know. I don't know if I would do it again. I mean, that's just, I want to say hell yeah in a second. But if I'm being real, I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes me bad, good, indifferent, but I mean, that's the way I feel. I really don't know if I would do it all over again, knowing what I know now. But like I said, I wouldn't trade it for the fucking world.
I love it, man. There's no right answer.
But
There's no right answer to this. There's no right answer. You've seen a lot for sure, so nobody would ever fault you either direction.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Man. David, thanks for the time. This was a blast. People
Thank
check
you
out
so
Ranger.
much for having me on.
One.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be in touch sometime soon. Thank you for having me on. Like I said, I'm very humbled to be sitting here talking to you. So thank you so much for your time.
I hope you enjoyed that combat story. Got a couple comments from listeners. The first is a YouTube comment on the Josh Johnson interview, and it's from Fun with Cars. It says, I've only just stumbled across this video and watched it right through. I'm definitely going to be watching and listening to more. Please also let me thank you and your guests for your service and the sacrifices you've made during your time downrange. I just wanted to read that out because I do love it when people stumble across us, however it is you get to us, and stick with us and listen to some of these incredible stories. It means a ton that people are taking their time when you've got so many other options out there to hear what these men and women went through. So thank you. And we've got another message from someone who's become a friend of mine on LinkedIn, actually, Chris Story, who says, Ryan, keep crushing it. Podcast keeps getting better and more interesting with the folks you bring on. Your interview style is awesome and you have an impressive story yourself. And I would just say, I think that the folks who are listening this far in and have gotten this far, who really enjoy the show, have seemed to really appreciate some of these recent stories, pilots and operators, that maybe they don't get the million views, but I think they're really landing well with the Combat Story Faithful, which I appreciate. So thank you for all the messages you've sent. Helps me keep going, and I know it's really motivating to the men and women we bring on here. So thanks a lot. Stay safe, y'all.